there, fellow Patriots. Welcome back again to Patriots of the American Republic. Continuing with the last couple of videos, right? The situation over in the Middle East continues to develop. There's a slew of information that continues to happen, but we're going to get into a little bit more, some phenomenal things, interesting things, right, that are happening worldwide, and they're quite shocking. But let's just go through the motions here. Now, when the attack from Hamas on Israel broke out on October the 7th, my wife and I were on a weekend trip for a wedding in Maine. As I turned on the news, my wife watched as bombs exploded and buildings collapsed, and my wife's face filled with despair as more information was revealed regarding the massacre at the concert. We saw people being kidnapped and worse, right? So I explained to my wife the details happening right now seem, very similar to what took place almost, 10 years ago. I explained to my wife, this isn't the first time that Hamas has attacked Israel. I proceeded to explain the events that would take place within the next few days, right? Israel would launch a counterstrike. Due to Hamas using civilian locations as bases of operations, there would be Palestinian casualties. Propaganda campaigns would begin globally, causing international outrage, which would then put pressure on Israel to stop any advancement militarily, right? So we're going into our fourth week of this, right? And everything that I told her I said was going to happen is pretty much how it came to pass. Unfortunately, the only Jewish country in the entire world gets attacked, but when it attacks back, they're the villain. I find that just mind-boggling. From a logical point of view, it completely boggles my mind, unless you take into account the possibility or the reality of anti-Semitism. And if you look at it, that there's an anti-Semitic sentiment worldwide, then it begins to, unfortunately, make sense. As mentioned in my previous video, I knew Hamas would begin to show videos of civilian casualties in order to gain sympathy and cause, again, international pressure to get Israel to stop counterattacking them. Their ploy seems to be working in some regards, but Israel's not backing down. I don't think, based on what happened, Israel's going to back down at this point. As they continue their now ground offensive into Gaza, and they continue to push forward, and they continue to eliminate the terrorists. Now, what they've had to do, unfortunately, due to the propaganda that's coming out from Hamas, they've had to now I don't want to say join in that propaganda, because that's not what it is, but they have had to release information to combat the propaganda that's going on, right? So, and what is surprisingly disgusting, that is different this time around than before, is that the support that Hamas is getting from non-Muslims, again, due to the victimized mentality that has, engulfed our society. I mean, I can't understand anyone other than Nazis standing with Nazis. But to see people standing with terrorists is a shocker for me. We went from, again, 9/11 defeating terrorism to now justifying terrorism and even defending it, as we will see as we continue to progress through this video. So let's tackle the first chapter. I'm going to break these up chapter to chapter for you. I want to focus here on the propaganda war. From the very beginning, I pretty much knew that there was going to be a propaganda war. I mean, if anybody remembers what has taken place each time Hamas has attacked Israel, you know that there's going to be a propaganda campaign. As soon as Israel began bombing Gaza, it would only be a matter of time before pictures and videos would flood the internet of civilian casualties from Gaza, to counter the flood of videos and testimonies about what took place on the October 10th massacre. So Israel's trying to maintain its support for the counterstrike by inviting journalists to see raw footage that will, not be released out of respect for the victims, but to remind the world of the horrors committed by these terrorists. I think it's absolutely sad that they have to go to this length to combat what's coming out of the propaganda side of Hamas. But let's get into our two videos. I'm going to combine them together. And what this is Israel has invited us, journalists to see this, to see raw footage, again, of what these barbarians did that the left seems to be in denial of. But let's go ahead and get into the first one.
As the world debates the military response, 19 days since the worst terror attack in Israeli history, its leaders are trying to frame the stakes, today laying bare the brutality in graphic detail. Here's Raf Sanchez.
It felt like there couldn't possibly be new horror left to see. No brutality that hadn't already been shared or live streamed. But tonight, with global attention turning to the spiraling death toll in Gaza, Israel's military trying to keep the focus on the massacre that sparked the war, inviting NBC News and other journalists to a screening of raw video from the October 7th Hamas terror attack.
I have some sense of what's in this footage, and I've been trying to prepare myself, but I'm still anxious about what we're going to see.
For 46 minutes, we sat in stunned silence, watching video filmed by Hamas and filmed by their victims. Much of it had never been seen before. And while Israel's military is not releasing the clips because they're so graphic, they allowed us to describe what we saw, including a terrorist throwing a grenade into a bomb shelter where an Israeli father is shielding his two young sons. The blast kills the father and wounds the little boys. One of them howls, "Why am I alive?" and tells his brother, "I think we're going to die." A Hamas gunman stands over them, drinking Coke from their fridge. It's not clear what happened to the boys.
I'm sure that you can figure out that they are worse than ISIS, the way they behave.
The military released this video from a Hamas dash cam exclusively to NBC News, saying it shows a terrorist using a heavy machine gun to mow down survivors fleeing from the Supernova Music Festival.
Because I knew I just have to survive, just have to run.
Millet Ben Haim was among those running for their lives.
When I was growing up, there is this movie about the Holocaust. There is this scene that they're running and there is people shooting at them, and there is also like bombs on the ground. And I remember really thinking about this scene because it was so similar.
She hid in a bush with friends for hours waiting for rescue.
I don't know who I am, and I feel like a ghost most of the times.
Raf, it's a lot to take. Is there a sense this video could be seen eventually by a wider audience?
Yeah, Lester, this video has only been shown to journalists so far, but many ordinary Israelis are saying it should be made public for the whole world to see.
Earlier, Israeli officials showed journalists terrorist body cam footage of the initial Hamas invasion. Most of the material was not for publication, but officials said it was to combat a Holocaust denial-like phenomenon that is appearing in the media.
Of the couple hundred journalists who attended the screening, many of them were brought to tears by what they saw, and some had to get up and leave the room. But the IDF said it was important to release the unedited video to counter the narrative that's being pushed around the world that this is all just a big exaggeration.
And I have to say that in 15 years of reporting on conflicts, this is some of the worst, most brutal personal violence I have seen.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi told the nation that they are working together as an iron fist to eliminate Hamas.
So I think, number one, the denial is absurd, right? Because again, as I expressed in my previous video, that a lot of these reports are coming out from leftist channel, NBC, ABC, CNN. So again, if the right and the left align on the reporting, it's a high probability that it's factual, it's true. The fact that Israel has to do this is astonishing, right? I think most people would relate to the fact that when someone's attacked, you have the right to defend yourself and also retaliate, right? Depending on what the attack is, right? Because if it's somebody, let's say if it's just physical and somebody's just swinging away at you, well, you're not just going to sit there and take it and just go like this. You got to counter to stop the punches from coming at you, right? You know, I mean, it's just common sense. And yet, you know, when this first happened, Israel seemed to gain almost immediate support, you know, almost on a unanimous basis. And I figured they would, until the propaganda was going to be coming from Hamas, showing the casualties, and then slowly but surely the support would wane, and then everybody's now a victim, or it gets to the point where now Israel is no longer the victim, but Israel is now the villain, right? So why was this expected from my part? You know, because Hamas has been known to set up their bases of operations underneath, around, and in civilian buildings. I mean, we saw you know, in a prior video, a lieutenant from the British Army confirming that during the Obama administration. It's confirmed. I saw it with my own 2 eyes, where 2 Hamas agents. So let me give you guys a little bit of a backstory, because back before I got into politics, I used to think CNN was very credible, and I used to watch them specifically from an international perspective. And when this was all happening during the Obama administration, and I really didn't understand left, right, all that stuff, right? But they were again, the Obama administration was criticizing Israel for what they were doing, right? For the counterattacks against Hamas. And so, you know, Bibi Netanyahu was coming out and he was like, well, listen, we're firing wherever the rockets are being fired. We can't help but the fact that they're firing it from, you know, hospitals, children's schools, apartment complex. We don't have control over that. You should be criticizing them. Don't criticize us, right? And so, and the UN came in and was also criticizing them, because the UN, in my eyes, is very anti-Semitic, very anti-Israel as well. And so that was the thing. You know, the White House was on there as well, you know, and criticizing them and not really supporting them. And so I'm like, wait a minute, you know, we've got 2 sides to a different story. Which one's telling the truth? This is against a terrorist group. Why are we criticizing a legitimate government and kind of like giving, again, the same thing, giving any type of legitimacy towards a political, or excuse me, a terroristic group? And so one day, as I'm, you know, surfing through the web, I come across a video from an independent Indian from India, news reporter, and he's in his hotel room up on, you know, maybe like the 4th, 5th floor, goes to the balcony, and he captures live 2 Hamas terrorists constructing or putting together rockets and launching them. And again, he's in a hotel, so this is a civilian area, and I think across the street, I'm not sure if it was a school or a hospital, it was one of the 2 based on what the reporter was reporting on. And sure enough, the guy fires it. So I'm like, wow, I can't believe that CNN would denounce or criticize Israel without doing any investigation whatsoever. And that's when I really started to dig into you know, politics, and not just taking these people at face value and so on and so forth. So they have been totally known to do this stuff. It's not out of the realm. It's not out of the realm of possibility. And I mean, again, they're a terroristic group. Do they care about anything other than their cause? No, they don't. It's obvious they don't care about their people, right? You know, whatever argument goes down the drain because they're taking money that should go towards helping the Palestinian is going to bombs, rockets, artillery, ammo, terrorist tunnels, all of the stuff that they're doing, right? It takes resources, right? Anyhow, so like I said, none of this is any different. They've also gone as far as using people, their own people, as human shields. So again, nothing should be past these people. They could care less about anyone, including themselves. They only care about the cause and their reward. Whatever their reward is, whether it's material here or in the afterlife, they believe they're getting a reward. And that's all that really matters to them. Now, I'm not trying to be cold towards actual civilians that have unfortunately been caught up in this war, right? Obviously, you know, we see the civilians, obviously the people that were massacred on the 10th, but then there's the casualties also on the Palestinian side. And I'm not trying to belittle that. And I'm not trying to take that away. But the reality is, the reality is that you got to blame the people who initiated this. If they hadn't launched those rockets, this wouldn't be happening right now, right? So again, you know, it's difficult seeing, children being pulled out of rubbles, put in bags, etc. I get it. It's emotionally compelling, and one wishes that this wouldn't be happening. But the sad truth is, unfortunately, reality is that war is brutal. And this war was brought on by the actions of Hamas. We can't get away from that, right? Had they not attacked, there would be peace right now, and no one would be at war, and there would be no victims. The victims on both sides would still be alive to this very day. So the truth is that those images that we're all seeing of dead bodies is being shown deliberately in order to gain sympathy of the international community, to pressure Israel to stop. That's the reality. In other words, I'm free to kill them, but I want someone else to stop Israel from killing me, right? Hamas will use anything and everything it can in order to put the pressure on Israel the same way that it did a decade ago, right? They're looking for ceasefires, right? So the most recent example, which, I'm sure most of you, have heard, is that Israel rocketed, there was an Israeli rocket that hit a hospital, which makes it seem like Israel is targeting Palestinians on purpose, right? So in this video, we're going to take a look at one of the young Turks named Cenk Uygur, I think is his name. He's on Piers Morgan, and he's expressing his disgust towards the bloodthirsty government of Israel. Let's check this out.
I've been following your tweets with interest this week. You've been getting increasingly angry, I think it'd be fair to say. You said, I'm now enormously frustrated by US and Israeli government's barbaric acts in Gaza. I will not be shy in sharing that opinion on Piers Morgan's show today. Why are you so frustrated?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I didn't expect the framing that you put on this segment, and it's framing like that. That's disgusting. So I don't see what this has anything to do with anti-Semitism. I formed Young Turks and TYT with two Jewish friends who are some of my friends growing up. We've known each other and been brothers for over 40 years now. So I think what Hamas did is disgusting. I cry for those Israeli innocent civilians. But do I see you guys crying for Palestinians? I mean, Chris Christie was just on here treating it like it's no big deal because what, Palestinian lives don't matter? I think the real bigotry here is saying that Palestinians, we can kill 3 times as many of them already. And this is the appetizer. Netanyahu and his barbaric government have not even started the entree of murder and death and mayhem they're about to do. And that's somehow okay, killing 3 times as many Palestinian civilians, let alone the occupation, which is bigotry by definition. We say that everyone in the world can defend themselves, can have their own state, can have sovereignty, except the Palestinians. And the reasoning behind that is the Palestinians are what? They're what? The idea is that they are savages and that Muslims are too violent and cannot control themselves. So they must be occupied for 56 brutal, disgusting years. So I've had enough of the bigotry against Muslims and Palestinians. And I need you to speak out against that instead of covering every outrageous, atrocious action of the right-wing government of Israel and going, oh, it's anti-Semitism. No, and there is global anti-Semitism. There's anti-Semitism here in this country. 2 synagogues were shot up, Pittsburgh and in Southern California. We fight against that all the time. But then whenever Israel is criticized, people go, oh no, it's anti-Semitism. No, there's real anti-Semitism. Instead of attacking that, all you guys ever do is hide behind the veil of anti-Semitism. Do you know why Palestinians might not like Israelis? Because they've been oppressed for 56 straight years.
I found it very dispiriting to see people who call themselves liberals whose instant response, it seemed to me, to one of the worst terror attacks we've ever seen was to immediately side with the place where these attacks have been launched from. Now, I don't tar all Palestinians with the brush of being Hamas at all. And in fact, the sooner Hamas are out of there, the better for the Palestinian people and the world. But I just think the only human response you can have is, as you did, by the way, to your credit, is it was disgusting what happened on October the 7th. Now, the question then becomes, what is a proportionate response by Israel? Not just to the terror attacks of October the 7th, but obviously there is now a huge ongoing escalation in what has been, as you rightly say, a 56-year war, effectively, in varying degrees over that period. And that's where I think I'm struggling to see how a ground invasion by Israel, with all that would entail, particularly mass deaths of Palestinian civilians, how that is going to do anything for any peaceful resolution to this. I think it will have the opposite effect.
Yes. So let's take it one at a time. First of all, as you rightly point out, on Young Turks, we covered the atrocious actions of Hamas right from the get-go, and we condemned it as fully as anyone can possibly condemn it. Because not only are they killing those poor, innocent Israelis that didn't do anything, those little babies and the grandmothers, it's disgusting what they did. But on top of that, they're ruining the Palestinian cause. They've burned the moral high ground to cinders. And then on top of that, they smear all people of Muslim background like myself. And then it unleashes this bigotry of anti-Muslim bigotry throughout the world that I'm sick of. So screw Hamas and their barbarism, okay? Now, in terms of a proper reaction, yes, you need to get those hostages out. So now let's look at I'm going to suggest what to actually do. I'm going to be constructive. But first, let's look at the unconstructive solution that Israel had. Dropping bombs on residential buildings. 50 ambulances have been hit. 10 out of 25 hospitals don't operate anymore. The incubators are about to run out of energy. There's 45 babies that might die today. The parents, I just read on CNN, are writing the names of the kids on their calves, on their legs, so that if they are killed in a bombing and they're mutilated, they can find their bodies. Imagine writing the name of your child on their legs so that you could find them in the rubble after Israel or any government drops a bomb on them. And I need the West to understand something. Bombs kill people. And do you know how they kill people? They incinerate them alive, or their heads explode. So what happened in Israel was a disaster and disgusting. But you have to be equally honest and equally outraged at the immorality of incinerating babies and grandmothers and aunts and uncles, which is what we're doing right now. America cannot keep sending aid for death and destruction. Enough of the occupation. End it today. End it today. It's monstrous. Okay, I'm going to get
let me ask you this.
Solution.
I completely understand your passion and your anger. I completely get this. I, like you, want to see some resolution at the end of this horror that we're witnessing. How do you get rid of Hamas if you don't do it the way Israel are currently doing it? How do you actually eradicate what has become a nihilistic ISIS-style terror group who've quite deliberately, in my estimation, committed an outrage of such appalling scale that they knew that this would goad Israel into this kind of response? So why they did that, what is motivating it, who might be putting them up to it, who's helped them prepare for this, these are all questions we don't know the answers to yet. But it seems to me that Israel could, if it's not careful, be being lured into a massive trap here. And I hope that is not the case. But I'm curious, how do you get rid of Hamas if you don't do it the way Israel is currently doing it, albeit with horrific collateral damage in the face of thousands of innocent Palestinians being caught up in the bombing?
Yeah. So let me give you a short-term answer, long-term answer. And a lot of people are not going to like these, but these are realistic ways that you minimize civilian casualties. You do what America did with the Osama bin Laden raid. We didn't go drop a nuke on Pakistan. We didn't go destroy 6,000 residential buildings in the middle of Pakistan. We sent in special forces. Is it more dangerous to the special forces? Of course. That's the point of special forces. Try to find the hostages. Does it look like Israel's trying to find the hostages? If I have a family member that's a hostage, I'm disgusted by what Netanyahu's doing now. How do you know they're not in the buildings you're dropping bombs on? How do you know they're not in the tunnels you're dropping bombs on? How do you know they're not in the hospitals you're dropping bombs on? So if you want the hostages rescued, every rational human being can agree this is not the way to do it. This is the way to do death and destruction for the sake of death and destruction. It's collective punishment. It's genocide against Palestinians, and the world has to speak out. So my way is not pleasant either. It involves a lot of folks dying on both sides. I understand that. Those are super hard choices. But go find Hamas. Go find the hostages. Go rescue them instead of wantonly, indiscriminately killing after killing. And let's be honest, when you drop a bomb and a kid's head explodes and a grandmother is incinerated, that is terrorism. Killing 3 times as many civilians as Hamas is terrorism. And it is the same if it is done by a government. Send in as many special forces as you got. We should send in whatever you got to actually do the job at hand instead of what Netanyahu is doing, which is to kill these people to what? Send a message. And think about how unrealistic that is. And think about why his method has a 0% chance of working. How are the Palestinians supposed to rise up against Hamas? How would they prove they're against Hamas? Hamas ended all elections. Hamas ended democracy. So how are the Palestinians supposed to cry uncle? They're already crying uncle, but it's never enough for the bloodthirsty Netanyahu. No, more death of Palestinians, more babies killed. That's what his answer is. And it's this, and the United States of America, I'm running for president here. There's no way in the world I would allow this. Sending $105 billion. And it doesn't even go to Israel, Ukraine, or Taiwan. It goes to the defense contractors that bribe these greedy American politicians and then get most of that money. And so the long-term answer is 1967 borders and the biggest walls you've ever seen in your entire life. And no one's allowed to cross to either side. But the Palestinians get their state. It is unconscionable for them not to get their state. And if you're a moral person, of course you believe that the Palestinians are not the only people in the world that cannot govern themselves. If you say that, you are being, by definition, bigoted and a racist. We have to have two-state solution immediately. If 56 years of occupation and brutalizing these people is not enough, is 57 years going to be enough? Is 156 years going to be enough? I'm asking Israel, not out of hate, out of love. So many of my friends that I grew up with are Jewish. This is not good for them. This is not good for anybody.
So, as we can see, this guy put on one heck of a drama show on this channel, to be quite honest with you. Now just to clarify, this was almost a 12-minute interview where he spent 30 seconds condemning Hamas and the rest bashing Israel. Now, I wonder if his people got attacked the way Israel did, would he sound this way? But, we can see he made it a point to mention hospitals and babies and grandmothers and how Israel is indiscriminately killing them. But he never mentions, nor does he hold Hamas accountable for launching the rockets on civilians, right? Setting up headquarters and facilities at these civilian locations. His tactic, it's a tactic these people are using on purpose. And when I say these people on the left, right? Now, I'm sure there are casualties because, again, Hamas doesn't care about the Palestinian people. The fact that these people spend hundreds of billions in rockets, guns, ammo, digging terrorist tunnels, instead of governing and providing for their people is proof in itself. But we don't know what is fact and what is fiction from these people. We can't trust them because, like we mentioned in our previous video, there's Hollywood, right, where they fake deaths, right, to as a propaganda, right? They'll have people laying down where they're actually not dead, pretending to be dead. Anyhow, clearly the Young Turk has bought into the propaganda because the supposed Israel rocket that hit the hospital, which everyone seems to be condemning Israel for, turned out to be misfire from Hamas. And this was verified from multiple independent investigations, and they all concluded the same result, right? Now the interesting part here is this guy is spewing stuff. Now this proof may have come out before this interview was, but again, he's going out and saying all of this stuff. How he doesn't know how what if Israel is just bombing buildings, and what if there's hostages at this building? Listen, I think Israel knows what it's doing, and they're not just going to bomb buildings just to bomb it. Their intelligence is picking specific locations so that, based on their intelligence, not just their intelligence, but ally intelligence, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, there is a possibility where the hostages, that could very well happen, but they're not doing it indiscriminately, right? They're not just doing it randomly, right? And let me tell you something. If I was a hostage, and this is me again because I was there five months ago, you know what? Bomb the heck out of them. Bomb the heck out of Hamas. Make sure every one of those terrorists are dead so that they don't go out and brutalize anybody else. I'm okay with giving my life for that cause, right? That's just me personally. Everybody's going to have a different view and a different opinion. But let's get into our third video where we show the corroboration of the rocket misfire that hit the hospital. Again, people like this Turk guy are going to be condemning Israel left and right, but I don't think I've ever heard such passion from him on the other side. You've got one Israeli government. How many Muslim governments are out there? How many Muslim governments constantly call for the death of Israel? How many Muslim countries constantly do things towards the Jewish people? And this guy more than likely stays silent. But let's get into the video.
For those who might still have questions about who fired that rocket that killed at least 100 civilians at a Gaza hospital, there is new video and analysis that should put any of those questions to rest. Yes, the Israelis denied it was them and said it was clear it came from within Gaza. Yes, the NSC, the Pentagon, ultimately President Biden concluded it was not the Israelis. Today, the British government says it too has concluded in an independent investigation that the terrorists in Gaza were behind the blast. But there are still some, way too many, who want to at the least two sides it and suggest it's actually still a legitimate issue up for debate. The Wall Street Journal has provided perhaps the most conclusive and well-presented video analysis to date. The analysis starts off with cell phone video taken by an eyewitness and the ensuing fire in the parking lot and courtyard of that hospital.
A visual analysis by the Wall Street Journal shows that the explosion was caused by a failed rocket launched from inside Gaza, where Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad have been shooting rockets into Israel since the war began 2 weeks ago.
The Journal looked at 4 different camera shots of the rockets launching into the air, with at least one misfiring, catching fire, and falling off course. They did this by geolocating the cameras, verifying the timestamps, mapping their vantage points, etc. And as we showed you on this show last week, there is security camera footage of a barrage of rocket fire coming from Gaza itself. The Journal then shows another angle where you can see the actual misfire happening in real time.
10 seconds after launch, a tiny flash of light is seen, and the rocket starts to veer back west. The flash and change in trajectory are consistent with a failed rocket, not with Israel's Iron Dome defense system shooting it down. Weapons experts the Journal spoke to say this change in trajectory is caused by the explosion of the rocket motor.
Seconds later, the rocket fails completely, and another camera captures 2 explosions on the ground. An initial smaller blast followed by the large explosion at the hospital, and then more video from the eyewitness inside Gaza.
Fire engulfs the courtyard and burns for an extended period.
Ya Allah! Ya Allah! Ya Allah! And it's not only the video from the moments before and after the explosion, but like the Journal, like others, reviewed images of the aftermath, including the crater at the scene of the explosion, which indicates an impact pattern, shows it came from the east within Gaza, and the shallowness of the crater can be seen, shrapnel pattern, etc. It all provides proof that this was a failed rocket from within Gaza and not an Israeli missile, which would have had a much more severe impact with much more significant structural damage, as the U.S. intelligence reported last week. Now, it's worth noting, the Wall Street Journal initially and prominently reported Hamas's claims that it was an Israeli strike that did this. So did CNN, the Associated Press. By the way, AP has now done their own independent video analysis, including using a live Al Jazeera broadcast, which again shows the same conclusion. Rocket misfire as it happened. Again, they concluded it came from Gaza. And that Al Jazeera video, by the way, was making the rounds on social media as those outlets, including the New York, 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 New York pushed the terrorist narrative first. Now, not surprisingly, Hamas itself now refusing to provide any evidence to back up its claims. The New York Times quoting a spokesperson who scoffs at the idea of providing proof, who says we're obligated to present the remnants of every rocket that kills our people. In general, you can come and research and confirm for yourself in the evidence we possess. It's a reminder of what you're dealing with. You want proof? Come get it. If not, just believe what we say. Well, the Journal and the AP provided the proof. And that, I think, closes the door on any debate over who's responsible.
So as you can see, independent investigations were done by multiple sources, and they all concluded the same thing, and the evidence is there. So this propaganda about Israel attacking a hospital is utter BS, and people, emotional people like the young Turk here, like Cenk, clearly fall for it. Because why? Because they have an automatic bias. They have an automatic hatred towards the Jewish nation, the state of Israel. And you could say it because he's talking about a two-state solution. Hamas doesn't want a two-state solution, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Now, you know, there's something that's really interesting above all this, is that, and I can't remember who said it, but we're going to watch this next video. But it is true that a lie gets spread faster and further and lasts longer than the truth does, because that video came out with the investigation not too long ago, and there's still people that are talking about how Israel bombed the hospital to this day. But let's take a look at this next video here.
Possible ground invasion into the Gaza Strip.
Is Israel concerned about world opinion? I was frankly shocked by former President Obama yesterday calling for Israel to exercise caution and be concerned about being accused of war crimes, that they had some kind of obligation under international law, the rules of warfare. And it just seems to me to be such a double standard. Hamas is the government of Gaza. Nobody's saying Hamas has violated international treaties. I mean, this is absolutely horrific. What's the reaction in Israel?
Well, the two things that Hamas does is a double war crime that we've heard for years, and not only this time right now. First of all, they're firing all these rockets out of civilian areas, using them as human shields, and firing them indiscriminately into civilian areas into Israel, much less what happened on October 7th when they massacred about 1,400 Israelis. I think right now the Israeli leadership, and you saw Gallant and Netanyahu and Halevi there as the war cabinet, putting on a strong face. They have to deal with Israelis, Gordon, who have lost loved ones, have had the worst atrocities since the Holocaust. So I think in Israelis' leadership, and from Israelis that I've listened to from the north to the south, there's really no appetite for, sort of giving Hamas a break. They feel like this is something they need to eliminate. They've tolerated a terror state on their borders for more than almost 20 years, since 2005. Ambassador Oren yesterday, he went through some of the history. In 2005, there were 21 Jewish communities in Gaza, 8,000 to 9,000 Jews living there. There was a unilateral pullout from by Israel, leaving the whole Gaza Strip in the hands of then the Palestinian Authority. Hamas took over 2 years later, and what we had is called Hamastan by some, where you've had rockets in 2008-9, 2012-14, 2021, and now this massacre on October 7th. I don't think there's any appetite in Israel right now that they would allow a terror state to be on its border anymore.
Well, they shouldn't have an appetite. My question is, why is the international community seeming to have this double standard, that you have a terrorist government of Gaza and they're not being held to any kind of international? You don't hear anyone saying we need to try them for war crimes. We need to arrest the leadership. We need to freeze all of their... We're not hearing any of that. Why is that?
Well, some would explain it this way, Gordon, that it's the Jewish state. And we talked to someone down in Ofakim where over 50 or about 50 Israelis were killed. And he was saying that usually Israel has about 10 to 14 days of sympathy and empathy from the world, and then things begin to change. So I think we're seeing that change happen. And some may argue that actually that change happened a lot faster than it should have based on what happened on October 7th. So I think that explains some of it. The international community always, it seems, and this is historically, back to 67 and 73 or 82 when they did the first Lebanon War, there doesn't seem to be an appetite, or there is a double standard for Israel, the Jewish state.
Well, it just seems unbelievable. I mean, it literally happened within 24 hours of the attack. Suddenly people were saying Israel was committing war crimes. I mean, Israel didn't even have enough time to bury, let alone find all of the dead. And already you're hearing cries of Israel's committing war crimes. And then the buy-in to the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is a propaganda arm of Hamas, saying that 500 people were killed by an Israeli bomb at a hospital. Well, all of that is false, but that narrative went around the world unedited, and it just, forgive me, I'm getting upset. It just doesn't make any sense to me that you would have that kind of double standard.
So as you can see in that video, very nicely summarizes a lot of the things that we mentioned throughout the first couple of minutes of this video. And then touching on the truth factor, the lies, the propaganda, and then the criticism, right? So all those things were captured in that video.